Hey, hey, my feel good friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I am just so dang grateful to have you in those earbuds, to have you tuning in every week. Thank you so much, my friend. And I'm stoked on today's topic because we are getting super actionable on something that I do every stinking week, but I don't really talk about that often. We are talking about hot tips for marketing your podcast on Instagram. Okay. And this is something that I know very dearly because of the Feel Good Social podcast, right? Podcasting is something that I have just kind of dove into and figured it out along the way for my business. And that includes marketing the podcast every week and especially on Instagram, which is kind of what I like to focus on when it comes to social media marketing for myself, right? But I don't always take the angle of talking about podcasting on the show or sharing any of this knowledge that I have that I literally implement all the time. So today I am breaking down how I go about marketing the Feel Good Social podcast every week and sharing tips for how to do that in a streamlined and easy way for you that is going to get you realistic results, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about the expectations. I'm going to share some hot tips that I have recently discovered when it comes to sharing my podcast on Instagram and all that stuff. So if you do have a podcast or you are thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe you're working with someone who needs to promote a podcast or something like this conversation is going to be really great and actionable for you. So get out a pen and paper. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Hey, friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Do you know what your brand vibe is on Instagram? I have a new fun quiz that's just for you, my friend. I, of all people, know how hard it is to figure out how the heck you're supposed to translate your brand to the gram. And with this quick 7-question quiz, we will help you hone in on your brand's personality, voice, and visuals so that you can show up consistently and create content that looks beautiful and feels on brand for you. This quiz is so awesome. It's been a long time coming, and I know that you're going to have a lot of fun with it. Plus, the results will help you show up in the best way for you. If you'd like to check out our new brand vibe quiz, just head to feelgoodsocial.com/quiz. Pretty easy. Head to feelgoodsocial.com/quiz to find out what your brand's vibe is on social media and start showing up there for your brand. All right, my friend. Now, before I break down exactly my step-by-step process for turning my podcast episode every week into multiple Instagram promotions and what that looks like for me and what it could look like for you, I really quickly want to touch on why I love hosting a podcast and why I promote it on social media every stinking week, and also set some realistic expectations for your Instagram promotions of your podcast. Okay, so firstly, just talking about my podcast in general. I mean, I freaking love listening to podcasts. I love the format of podcasts, how intimate it feels. I love the fact that I get to be in your earbuds every week and just have a casual conversation with you. And I don't feel like I have to be showing up on some YouTube video with like jazz hands and sharing hot tips and keep it to under 5 minutes or whatever. I love that you can just hit play on my episodes and do the dishes or go on a walk or go on a drive or something like that, right? So that is why I love podcasting. I also was a little bit nervous to show my face when I first started my business. I still probably would be very, very awkward on a YouTube video, if we're honest. Like I'm a little bit more comfortable showing my face. I'm even a little bit more comfortable speaking into a microphone. It was kind of scary for me to start this podcast, if we're honest. And I spent a long, long time writing out all of my solo show episodes word for word because I didn't want to show up kind of candidly. And I was afraid that I would, say the wrong thing or stumble over my words and all that jazz, and people would hate me and not want to tune in again, right? Anyway, we're getting a little off topic here, but podcasting just made sense for me. And with time and over practice, we have now grown the show to over 50,000 downloads, 130 episodes. It's crazy, right? And I have definitely gained more confidence myself showing up as the host of this podcast. I think that the format of podcasting is super, super intimate, and it's a really great way to build trust with your ideal customers and reach them in a way that doesn't feel very pressurized and feels more friendly than a lot of the other avenues of content creation out. So I don't know, just had to throw that out there why I do love podcasting. And I have seen great results for my business, if we're honest, through this podcast. So podcasting is something that I would definitely recommend. I could totally do a different episode on like how to strategize podcasting and stuff. And I'm actually bringing on a podcast editor and manager from the Feel Good Social Club for an interview. So you'll definitely want to listen to that episode for sure. But today we are talking all about how to market your podcast, right? So, and specifically, I'm going to be sharing how I show up on Instagram every week for my podcast and sharing hot tips that I've figured out along the way when it comes to promoting your show, right? But the first thing I want to start with is setting realistic expectations for yourself when it comes to promoting anything on Instagram, but also podcasts included. Right. So I don't know. I've been feeling this lately. I feel like a lot of people think that every single one of their Instagram posts should perform super, super well as far as like reach, number of views, engagement, number of likes and comments and all that different stuff. Right. And if every single one of their posts doesn't reach a certain like number of views or reach a certain number of people or get a certain number of likes and all that stuff, then it's a flop post, right? And here is the thing. It's not every post is going to perform well in general, firstly, and not every type of post is going to perform the same. Okay. So if you're ever promoting anything in your business, whether that be one of your offers or promoting a podcast or promoting a blog post or anything like that, it's usually not going to perform quite as quote unquote well as one of your other posts that are more engaging, right? And it's because people don't really like interact with promotional posts as much. They're a little bit more boring than regular posts, if we're honest, right? Any type of promotional post or like the podcast snippets and preview that I share on Instagram, they're kind of like more boring than my regular posts, right? From the perspective of my ideal followers online. Like they're not like gaining immediate, like a life-changing tip or something like that, right? I'm not always saying something like super, super relatable or anything like that, right? Instead, no, I'm promoting the episode of the week by sharing like a small snippet. And yes, I try to make that snippet as valuable as possible and entertaining as possible and all that different stuff, but it's still not the same. So I never expect my podcast promotions to perform quote unquote as well as some of my other posts. But the other thing I want to tell you is that posts like this perform in a different way that you can't measure as well, right? And it's more about like quality over quantity when it comes to the post performance, right? So instead of liking your post, maybe people are going to the link in your bio and listening instead, right? And that's not something that you can necessarily track and or measure. Plus, I think it's more valuable for my podcast and my business if I get 2 people to listen to the episode from one Instagram post that day rather than having 5,000 people watch a reel or something, right? Because 2 new listeners to a podcast episode is so, so valuable for me. And so it's more about the quality of the results in that way than it is about the quantity in numbers and the ego boost, right? So always remember that with any post that you share on Instagram. It's not always about like the number of likes and the number of people you reach and the number of views you get and all that stuff. Like that's not always what matters the most. Sometimes if you can just reach one person and change one person's day, get that one comment on your post of someone who's like, oh, I loved this. I loved listening to this episode. I just got one last week like that. And I was like, yes, this is so worth it. On a reel that only got 200 views. I got a comment. I actually got 3 comments. It was so awesome. Only 200 views, but 3 comments. One saying, this was such a helpful tip. Thank you so much. One saying, oh, I saved this post. This was so great. And the other one saying, oh my gosh, I loved the podcast episode that went along with this, because it was a post that had to do with my podcast episode of the week, right? And those 3 comments are worth so much more to me than if I would have gotten 5,000 views on that reel, right? So always remember to measure your results in that way as well. That's why I get so freaking annoyed sometimes when people are all up the analytics butt, because it's not always like clear cut, black and white, and people aren't always prioritizing the results that mean the most, right? So just remember that. Okay. Expectation, reality check over with. Let's dive into my exact process for promoting the podcast on Instagram every week. Okay, so the first thing I always do every week is share a teaser of my podcast episode as a reel. Okay, this is something that has evolved over time. I just used to share audiograms. So audiograms are kind of like you may see them sometimes when people share podcast episodes. Usually they go along with podcasts, but it kind of has like that wavy line that moves with like the voice as someone's speaking, right? And people usually share those with podcasts to give some movement so people know that there is sound happening because there's not video with podcasts normally, right? And so I used to just share an audiogram every week with like a snippet from my podcast, a voice audio clip from my podcast overlaid on top of an image. And then I would add that audiogram waveform on top of it. And it would just be a square post that I shared every week. Those are the good old days when life was easy, right? When it comes to Instagram. Now Instagram has changed. Their algorithm has changed. They're definitely prioritizing reels more so over regular static posts or regular video posts, right? And so over time, I have actually evolved my weekly teasers that I share of the show to be video snippets, actually, because while I don't share full episodes as a video podcast, I do record my episodes, especially with guests, with video, right? Because I record with Zoom at this point. That might change in the future, but right now I can take video snippets out of each of my episodes, right? So I've created a Reels template that I drop my video snippets from the podcast into, and it says the episode number, and I add closed captions on top so that people don't have to necessarily listen. They can just read what my guests are saying and all that different stuff. And so that is how my weekly teasers has evolved, right? And I do recommend that you share a weekly promotional teaser from your episode. Try to choose a clip that is super interesting for your ideal listener, right? And also something that's like enticing, right? Something that's going to want to make them go listen to the full episode. Either think, oh my gosh, that was so helpful, I need more, right? Or even a cliffhanger-ish tip where it's like kind of telling why something is important and then almost leads into, so here's how you do it. And then maybe it like cuts off or something. I don't know, kind of clickbaity, but whatever. If you can share a teaser like that, then that is going to probably get you the best results when it comes to people going and clicking and listening to your show, right? So I definitely recommend sharing a weekly teaser just to give people an update of what the episode's about this week, right? I recommend sharing it in a Reels format at this point. It doesn't necessarily have to be a video snippet, but that's what I do just because video is kind of more magnetic. You can see the guests' faces as they're describing something, and it's kind of fun to see that behind the scenes stuff. But you could also just share like a static image, with the audiogram waveform on top of it, like I was saying before. But I would recommend sharing it in Reels format just because if you're gonna create a video, why not make it in like the vertical format that is Reels, so you can share it as a Reel because they are getting better reach than just regular video posts right now, right? Also, if you share it or if you create a Reels format teaser for your podcast, you can share that as an idea pin on Pinterest as well. Or you could share it as a TikTok video, right? You could share it as your Instagram story of the day. There are so many different ways you can share this Reels formatted teaser, which is super, super helpful. So I always like to get the most bang for my buck when it comes to this sort of stuff, right? Okay, now let's talk about the different types of teasers you can share and break this down a little bit more, right? Because like I said, I have tested out lots of different types of teasers for my podcast, and they've really evolved over time. I started with that little square video post, but now I do recommend that you created it in the longer form Reels format, right? But there are different types of teasers you can create. So you can create an audiogram mockup. Like I said, you can add one of those waveform things on top of a static image and just do an audio clip with the reel. Although I do recommend that you add some sort of movement to that sort of clip because reels technically are videos and you want to capture people's attention. And if it just looks like a static post, then people are probably going to swipe away from it if we're honest, right? Also, you want to make sure that you add closed captions because not everyone listens to videos on Instagram with their sound on. And so often, if you just have audio, people don't even realize that there is audio going along with it unless you add closed captions. But luckily, if you are an Instagram user, TikTok has this as well. They do have a closed caption button that you can just click and then they add the closed captions for you, right? So you can do this on stories and reels on Instagram. Disclaimer real quick. My mindset coach the other day, I create content for her as well. And she actually doesn't have the closed caption button for her reels. Like, I don't know if you know this about Instagram, but its features are kind of different across all of its accounts. I wish that Instagram would just have everyone all have the same access to all the features, right? But that doesn't always happen. And sometimes it takes longer for Instagram to roll features out to different accounts and stuff like that. So if you don't see a closed caption button on your reels and or your Instagram stories, it's just probably because your account doesn't have that yet, which is unfortunate, but hopefully it'll get it soon, right? But technically, you should be able to do closed captions for both your stories and your reels. You basically just go up to the top of your screen as you're creating it. There's like a little sticker button where you can find the GIFs and all the different stuff, right? And there is a CC button. That's where you add your closed captions via Instagram. It listens to the audio on your video or your audio clip and just adds the captions for you, which is awesome. But I do have to say, it doesn't always get it right. There's no way to edit the captions that it auto generates for you, right? And so, I honestly don't care that much. I just let it go. It never tends to spell my name right. It always tends to get one word wrong. And it's a horrible word that makes me sound like I'm saying something totally wrong. I don't know. But oh well, to me, it's not worth my time to go add my auto generated or my captions manually. It's so worth it to have a word spelled wrong here or there or sound like I'm saying something a little bit differently, but have them auto generated with just one click in Instagram, right? So I do recommend that you use those to add captions to your reels. And you can do the audiogram mockup with just an audio clip. Or you could do a quote with a voiceover. So this is something that I've actually seen quite great results from when it comes to reach and views on Reels on Instagram, is finding an audio clip from my episode and then creating a quote that either is from the audio clip, like literally something I said, or it's kind of like a catchy quote that has to do with whatever I'm talking about, right? So, and it doesn't have to be like a quote, like someone said it, like Abe Lincoln or something. No, it can just be a saying that's like kind of catchy for people, right? Like, you don't always have to make the algorithm happy. Might be one that I put into quote form in a reel with an audio voiceover of me explaining why I think that it's more important to focus on your brand's content strategy versus trying to chase the trends and make the algorithm happy, because it's more sustainable for you long term and will get you better results long term, right? That's not something that I would want to type into just like one single quote that seems like shareable for people on Instagram, right? So choose an audio clip from your episode that's explaining like a super powerful topic or something like that. And then just like create a one sentence quote, a one liner that is like very, very powerful, that is kind of like has to do with the topic that you're talking about, right? Turn it into a quote reel, do the audio overlay, the audio clip overlay. And then what I like to do is add some sort of like video in the background behind my reel. I actually have several templates in the Feel Good Social Club for just this exact thing, right? Where it's like a quote reel and it's like very, very shareable quote with like leaves blowing in the background video and the quote is like overlaid on top, and it's just easy to create, it's easy to share. And then if you add a podcast clip on top of that, that's explaining the topic or explaining the concept behind the quote, it just makes it even more powerful, right? And that can totally in the caption say, do you want to hear more on this, or do you want to hear the full episode? Head to link in my bio, go listen to my episode 123 or whatever it is, right? And then the final type of teaser that I share is a video snippet from the interview, like I said. So I have a mock-up. I have several templates I've created. I actually have multiple sets of templates in the Feel Good Social Club for podcast previews, just like this, right? Where it kind of mocks up the title of your show, and there's a place where you can drop a video snippet or even just a photo of your guest. There's a place where you can put your auto-generated caption, right? And then it also has your website and or link in bio to listen now, right? So it tells people how they can listen right now. If you create a template like this for your show that you can share every week, it makes content creation so much easier. But this is the teaser that I share every week for the Feel Good Social podcast. So if you want to see the examples, head to @FeelGoodSocial on Instagram. My feed is full of them because we do a weekly episode, right? Where you'll be able to see the video preview of my guests and you'll be able to see what that looks like in action. But these are the ones that I like to share generally because I just think that it's what people are expecting every Tuesday when my new episode comes out. And so when they see that template that I share again and again, they can watch the little video snippet and be like, oh, this episode topic sounds interesting. I'm going to go listen to today's episode, right? One more thing I wanted to say too is that even if you are not necessarily getting direct clicks from Instagram to your podcast or whatnot, I still think it's important to tease the show every week and tell people what the show is about, because you are reminding them that one, you have a podcast, two, you're letting them know the topic of the podcast, and three, even if they don't go listen right in that moment, because hey, no one wants to stop what they're doing to go do a different thing, right? If people are on Instagram scrolling, they were on there to scroll. They were planning to scroll Instagram right now. They weren't planning to go listen to a 40-minute podcast episode, right? But they may make a mental note to go listen to your podcast later when they open their podcast app to do some listening, right? So even if people don't go directly to your podcast from Instagram, even if you can't track those clicks or anything like that, it's still working to remind people, oh my gosh, I got to go listen to Kinsey's Feel Good Social podcast. Oh yeah, she has a podcast. Oh my gosh, this week's topic sounds so good. I'm going to go listen later whenever I'm ready to listen to my podcasts, right? Like, still share these previews, share these teasers every week, my friend, even if you are not getting very great like results, or if you're not getting click-throughs or anything like that, because there's a lot happening behind the scenes that you can't track when it comes to this stuff. And it's really, really important to show up consistently and remind people, I have a podcast. Here's the topic of the week, right? So just wanted to put that out there because, man, tracking results has been getting on my nerves a little bit lately when it comes to Instagram. Okay, so share a teaser every week. Make it in Reels format if possible. If you're sharing to Instagram, you can also repurpose it as an idea pin on Pinterest. Share it to your Instagram stories. Share it to TikTok if you want. All that jazz, right? Different types of teasers you could share are audiogram mockups, a quote with a voiceover, or a video snippet of the interview. I think when it comes to what day you should share it, I usually try to share it on Tuesdays, the day that my episode is released every week. But I don't think that that is the biggest deal in the world. I used to share a teaser before my episode was released, like the day before or something like that. And I get that question from guests sometimes, like, oh, should I share this now so I can tease it and people can get ready to listen the day it comes out? Like, my advice honestly is nah. Like, people want to be able to take action in the moment, right? These days, like, it used to be that they would get excited and they liked teasing things beforehand and stuff like that. But when it comes to your weekly podcast episode, like, I want to share something that people can take action on right now if they want to, right? So I share day of, and or if I have to share later in the week, that's okay too. Okay. Podcasts, what I love about them is that they are very long lasting. I get people who go back and listen to my first episodes still. Like, podcast episodes last even longer than blog posts do. I swear. People go back and listen to old episodes and all that different stuff, right? And so it's okay. You don't have to share the day it comes out. It's okay to share it later. It's okay if you're taking like a summer break from your podcast to go back and promote past episodes even, right? I've done that before where I'm like, hey, we're skipping the podcast this week, but you should definitely go back and listen to the episode from like 2 months ago, right? Because that was a really good one. And that's okay. And people will still go back and listen. So I don't necessarily think that the release date is like the day that you have to share it, but I would definitely recommend sharing it on like the release date or like later and not beforehand so that people can take action on it now, right? Real quick, have I invited you to join the Feel Good Social Club yet? Oh man, my friend, I would love for you to check out our new monthly membership for down-to-earth entrepreneurs who are ready to create content with ease, actually show up and strategically market your business online every month, and also make friends with rad down-to-earth entrepreneurs who are just like you, who get it, who are in the posting trenches with you, and who are ever ready to give you a friendly air high five or kick in the accountability booty whenever you need it. The Feel Good Social Club is where it is at. Check it out, feelgoodsocial.com/club. In the club, we have a content library full of Canva templates and tutorials and resources to help you make content creation as easy as possible. We also have monthly content planning workshops where we all come together and talk about the upcoming month's strategy for our content. And we also have community forums where you can get together, ask questions of other club members, brainstorm ideas, ask for feedback. So definitely check it out, feelgoodsocial.com/club. Our Feel Good members are seriously some of the most amazing people that I have ever met. And I would love for you to join us, feelgoodsocial.com/club. Check it out. Join today. We would love to see you in there, my friend. All right, let's dive back into today's episode. Okay, so the software that I use to create teasers and posts for my podcast, I usually use Canva for everything at this point because it is great for the designing part of it. I've created Canva templates that I use that I can just like plug in my different teaser clips every week, change the episode number, change the title of the episode, and boom, there we go. Super, super easy, right? Plus, I love Canva. You can add the audio clips, you can add the video clips, but it's so easy to design within Canva itself, right? I have Canva templates in the Feel Good Social Club for podcast previews. I usually go in and create different previews and make them branded based on my guests that I'm supporting that week as well, just to have that little extra support and fun when it comes to giving them incentive to share the episode on their Instagram feed, right? So Canva is super, super awesome, but there are a few things that I wish we could do with Canva that you can't. And one is adding that audiogram wave, right? So whenever in the past, if you've seen like an audio clip and there's like a wave, that's like moving back and forth as the person is speaking, and like the waves get bigger and smaller depending on the person, like the person's volume or something. I don't even know how they work really. but anyway, you cannot add those audiogram waves in Canva that are dependent on your audio clip itself, right? That's not a feature that Canva offers. And another thing that Canva doesn't offer that I'm so waiting for them to integrate into their platform is generating captions, right? Closed captions, right? Because while I do just use Instagram's auto generate caption feature or whatever it is, it would be nice to just go ahead and add them in Canva so that I can make sure that all of the words are spelled correctly and all that different stuff. But it's not easy for me to do. So whatever, I just use Instagram's auto generated caption thingy. And sometimes it does not say what I'm saying in real life, right? But if you do want to add the audiogram wave feature to your teasers, and or if you want to do your own auto-generated captions, the software that I go to is headliner.app. Okay, so in your computer browser, put headliner app. I actually haven't used it on my phone, even though it's headliner.app. I only use it in my computer browser, but it is a free software that I absolutely love and I have used for a long time for adding those audiogram waves and adding closed captions to videos, especially my podcast previews. I don't really use it anymore because it's an extra step outside of Canva at this point, and it's not really worth my time, unfortunately. You got to prioritize like what's worth it, like a few misspelled words with Instagram's auto generate caption feature, or spending an extra 15 minutes using Headliner to add those captions. Like for me, it's not using Headliner, right? But that is the software that I would recommend if you do want to add the audiogram wave and or closed captions, right? Okay, so now that we have established the very first step to sharing your podcast on Instagram every week, which is to share a teaser of your episode, and I've really broken down a few different types of teasers you can share. By the way, all of these templates are available in our Feel Good Social Club, feelgoodsocial.com/club. If you want access to templates to share teasers for your podcast, head to the club. I would love to see you in there, my friend. But let's talk about a few other ways that you can share your episode on Instagram every week, right? So what I do, firstly, share the teaser, and then I focus on my Instagram stories. And I really, really recommend that you share your podcast to your Instagram stories every week, because Instagram stories has a link button where you can link your podcast episode to your stories and people can literally click through and listen now, right? Because that is another reason that regular posts don't perform very well as far as getting people to actually go listen to your podcast right now, right? Because people have to go to the link in your bio and find it, right? It's just that extra step. But with Instagram stories, you can link the episode right there. People can click through, go listen to it now if they want to, right? So sharing your episode to your Instagram stories every week is a really great idea, and especially linking your episode so that people can click through. So what I do is share my teaser reel. Then I will share that reel to my Instagram stories, right? Because if I share my reel to my Instagram stories, the views that you get in your stories add to your reel, just like a little nerdy social media trick for upping your reels a little bit. Like it doesn't even really matter that much if we're honest. But I will share my reel to my Instagram stories. And in that slide, I will also link my blog post for my episode. That's the show notes that also has my episode embedded so that people can listen, right? And it pushes people to my website, to the blog post with the show notes where they can listen right there on my website, right? So that is the first thing I do is share the reel, link my blog post with my show notes to that slide of my Instagram stories. Okay. Then what I do is share the episode from Spotify, right? Because here's the thing. While I think it's a great idea to send people to your website to listen to your episode, I also really like to share my episode on multiple platforms because I think it's really valuable to have people go to the platform where they normally listen to podcasts and land on your show on that platform, because then the platform is more likely to suggest your show in the future to them because they've already listened to it. Right. So my two most popular listening platforms are Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Right. And what I love about Spotify is if you go to Spotify and you find your show and you click the three dots next to the episode that you want to share, then there will be a share button and you can share to Instagram from there. And when you share an episode from Spotify to Instagram, it'll take you to your Instagram stories and it'll have just a little square box with your podcast cover, it'll have the episode name and stuff. But here's the trick. When you share that, there will be a little button up at the top next to your profile photo in your Instagram stories that says listen on Spotify. And this is something that took me forever to figure out. Like I did not know this was a thing until another podcast host pointed it out to me after she interviewed me for her show, which I was like, oh my gosh, you're the best. But yeah, basically, if you share an episode from Spotify to Instagram, after you share it, after you hit that share button, if you go back into your stories and you look up near your profile photo, you will see a little link that says listen on Spotify, right? But it's kind of hard for people to see, and a lot of people don't know it's there. So what I do is I will add a little pointing GIF emoji pointing at that sticker, right? And say, listen on Spotify. I will type that out with like the type text tool thingy, right? So I will have a little pointing GIF pointing at that little sticker that is right there. I will say, listen on Spotify. Type it out in my story so that people see it and they know to click on that if they're a Spotify listener. And then on that same slide, I actually link to my Apple podcast, to my show on Apple Podcasts, right? So what I will do is after I hit the share to Spotify button and it's in my Instagram story, before I actually share it, I will go out of the app. I will go over to Apple Podcasts. I will find my show there. I will copy the link to the episode over there. I will go back to Instagram stories. This is getting so detailed, you guys. But I will go back to Instagram stories. I will go up to my stickers. That same link sticker that I was talking about on the previous slide to link to your blog post on your website, I will use that to link to Apple Podcasts, right? So I'll paste the link for the link sticker, and then I will type out the text for the button to say tune in on Apple Podcasts, right? So it's the same slide. So basically, my Instagram stories become the first slide of the day is sharing my reel teaser to my stories with a link to my blog post and my show notes, right? The second slide of my stories of the day is going to be sharing from Spotify with both options to tune in on Spotify and or tune in on Apple Podcasts. So people have the choice. Are they normally Apple Podcast listeners or are they normally Spotify listeners, right? And I will highlight both of those links on that same slide so that people can see oh, I'm a Spotify person. I need to go up here and tap this one, right? And I know it's a little bit confusing. I don't know if you're confused as I'm explaining this right now, but what I want to encourage you to do is go to my stories today, if it's a Tuesday, or wait till next Tuesday and check out how I do this, because it's something that I do every single week. And it's just a part of the process. And I think it makes it easier for people to tune in now if they want to, right? So that's what I recommend you do, is like try to make it as easy on your listeners as possible and promote it in multiple parts of the platform in multiple ways, right? Okay. I have 2 more tips for sharing your podcast on Instagram, my friend, and I will try to get through them quickly because I know I can be long-winded with this stuff. Okay. So now that we have legitimately teased our episode, right? Sharing a real teaser post and then also sharing it to our Instagram stories, that is not the end game when it comes to sharing your weekly episodes on Instagram, okay? Don't let it just stop there. Totally go back and listen to our repurposing episode if you want to hear how you can use your weekly themes to create more content and all that different stuff on Instagram, because I talk about it as my podcast being my core content theme every week for Feel Good Social. But what I usually do is whatever the heck the theme of the week is, I will create most of my posts about that topic for that entire week. And I will often make the call to action, hey, if you want to hear more about this topic, go listen to this week's episode of the podcast, right? Because you don't just need to tease it one time and then forget about it, right? It's okay to use more of the topic as like more content ideas and then say, P.S. If you want to hear more about this, go tune into the podcast episode this week. I break it down for you, right? I do this all the time. Most of my call to actions on Instagram are leading back to a podcast episode, if we're honest, because I have so many out there now, right? But for example, for Feel Good Social, this week's podcast theme is promoting your podcast on Instagram, right? So I have shared a teaser post, a teaser reel I've shared to my Instagram stories. If you come back to my page tomorrow or the next day of this week, especially, I will probably be sharing more posts about different topics within this episode, right? Maybe I share a post that goes, my 2 favorite softwares to share that help me market my podcast every week or something like that, right? And I'm talking about Canva and Headliner. But then in the PS, in the caption, the call to action will be, by the way, if you want to learn more about marketing your podcast on Instagram, go listen to my podcast episode this week. I share so many tips, right? So create more content around your podcast. It doesn't just have to be the teaser post. Maybe you share a video snippet teaser post on the day it's released, but then you also share a quote teaser post 2 days later or something like that, right? Maybe you draw tips out of your episode, like I was just saying. Maybe you tell personal stories about the topic of your episode that can lead back to your episode. You don't just have to leave it at the teaser post, right? So create lots of content around your podcast topic. And then finally, share behind the scenes, my friend. Sharing behind the scenes, no matter what it is in your business, is so, so amazing because it helps to build trust with your ideal customers. It makes them feel like an inside part, like a part of the inside crowd or whatever when it comes to your brand, right? Like, sharing behind the scenes is so, so helpful for building trust and actually selling and converting your audience. So share behind the scenes of you editing your podcast, of you recording your podcast, of you interviewing guests for your podcast. Share it to your Instagram stories. Maybe turn those stories into reels if they make sense for you, right? But just continuing to show up and remind people, hey, I have a podcast. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to share this podcast guest. Oh, look at my notes for this podcast episode that I just recorded. Like, it just reminds people you got a podcast and it makes them want to go listen to it, right? So that is my best tips for sharing your podcast on Instagram, my friend. I hope that you found these helpful. If you did, I would love for you to share this episode to your Instagram stories and make sure that you tag me. I'm at Feel Good Social. I would love to see it, reshare it, spread the love right back to you. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. I will catch you next time I catch you. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. For show notes and a whole lot of other awesome freebies, visit feelgoodsocial.com. Simply go to feelgoodsocial.com for all the goods.